Homeless man gets bullied for asking for spare change. Keanu Reeves steps in the most unexpected way. When a homeless man is publicly humiliated for asking for spare change, the crowd looks away, except for one man. Keanu Reeves watches the scene unfold and decides to step in. But what he does next stuns everyone into silence. Los Angeles was alive with its usual symphony. Cars honking, pedestrians weaving through the streets, the clinking of silverware from the sidewalk cafes. Amid the noise and movement, Keanu Reeves sat alone at a small outdoor table of a cafe, his presence unnoticed by the bustling crowd. Dressed in a plain black jacket and jeans, he sipped his espresso, content to watch the world go by. There was something peaceful about blending in, about being just another face in the crowd. But not everyone was invisible. A few feet away, a homeless man sat on the sidewalk, his clothes tattered but his expression polite. His name, though few bothered to ask, was Tommy. With quiet dignity, he lifted his hand whenever someone passed, his voice gentle. "Spare change, sir? Ma'am?" Most ignored him. A few shook their heads, others quickened their steps. Then came the laughter. It started with a scoff, then the sound of sneakers scraping the pavement as three young men approached. They were in their early 20s, wearing expensive streetwear and the smug expressions of people who had never been told no in their lives. The tallest one, cocky, dressed in a designer hoodie, grinned as he pulled a few coins from his pocket. He tossed them onto the ground near Tommy's feet, the clinking sound sharp in the afternoon air. "There you go, man," he said mockingly. "Don't spend it all in one place." His friends burst out laughing. Tommy flinched at the sound, his face heating with embarrassment. But he didn't react. He had learned that reacting only made it worse. The second guy, smirking, picked up one of the coins and tossed it again, letting it land inches from Tommy's knee. "Hey, do a little dance for us, and maybe we'll give you another one." Tommy stared at the ground, his hands curled into fists in his lap, but he didn't move. Keanu set his cup down. The people around them had noticed. Some glanced over uncomfortably before looking away. A few exchanged whispers but made no move to intervene. Keanu exhaled slowly and stood up. He didn't stride over in anger. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he walked toward Tommy and, without hesitation, sat down next to him on the sidewalk. The laughter died. The bullies blinked, their smirks faltering as they registered who he was. One of them whispered, "Wait, is that?" Keanu didn't acknowledge them. Instead, he turned to Tommy, his expression calm. "Mind if I sit here?" Tommy hesitated, eyes darting between him and the group of young men, as if expecting a trap. Sure?" Keanu nodded, resting his elbows on his knees. He glanced at the coins scattered on the pavement, then back at Tommy. "People can be real assholes sometimes, huh?" Tommy let out a breathy chuckle, surprised. Yeah, they can." The tallest bully scoffed, trying to regain his confidence. "Okay, what is this? Some kind of act?" Keanu finally looked at them, his gaze steady. "No act." His voice was calm, almost too calm, the kind that made people nervous. The second guy shifted uncomfortably. "We were just messing around." Keanu nodded as if considering that. "Right, a joke." He tilted his head slightly. "Tell me something. When you walk away from this moment, what part of it are you going to be proud of?" Silence. Ryan, the youngest of the three, lowered his gaze. The leader scoffed again, but it was weaker this time. "Whatever, man, let's go." He turned sharply, shoving his hands into his hoodie pocket. His friend followed, but Ryan hesitated for a second longer, sneaking one last glance at Tommy before walking away. As they disappeared down the street, Keanu leaned back on his hands, stretching his legs out. "You okay?" Tommy let out a small, shaky laugh. "Yeah, I think so." Keanu nodded, then reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. He took out a crisp stack of bills, not as a grand gesture, not for show, but as a quiet offering. He handed it to Tommy. Tommy's breath hitched. I can't take this." Keanu pressed it into his hand anyway. "You can, and you will." Tommy stared at the money, his fingers trembling. It wasn't just about the cash. It was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at him like a person. Keanu patted his shoulder lightly before standing. He gave Tommy one last nod before walking back to his table, picking up his espresso as if nothing had happened. The crowd, which had been silent, began to murmur. People whispered, exchanged glances, and a few even pulled out their phones, recording what they had just witnessed. But Keanu wasn't doing it for them. He did it because it was right. And as he sipped his coffee, he knew this wasn't over yet. Keanu Reeves wasn't the type to draw attention to himself. He never sought the spotlight outside of his films, never felt the need to prove anything to the world. But as he watched the scene unfold, the cruel laughter, the coins tossed like scraps, something in him stirred. He had seen this before, not just on the streets but in life. He knew what it felt like to be unseen, to be dismissed as if you didn't matter. He had lost people, his best friend, his lover, his unborn child. He had experienced grief so deep it hollowed him out, leaving him wandering the world in quiet solitude. And yet, even in his darkest moments, kindness had found him. He remembered a time, years ago, when he was just another struggling actor in Hollywood. There were days he had nothing but a few bucks to his name, sleeping on friends' couches or in his car between auditions. One night outside a diner, an old man had shared a sandwich with him, expecting nothing in return. "Sometimes we all just need someone to see us," the man had said. That night had never left him, and now sitting in that cafe, watching Tommy shrink under the weight of humiliation, Keanu knew he couldn't stay silent. He didn't believe in grand speeches, he believed in actions. So he did the simplest thing he could. He sat down. The moment he lowered himself onto the sidewalk, he felt the energy shift. The bullies stopped laughing. The bystanders, who had been too afraid to intervene, suddenly noticed. But Keanu wasn't doing this for them. As he handed Tommy the money, he saw the man's hands shake, not out of greed but disbelief. When was the last time someone treated him like a human being? Keanu didn't pity him, he respected him. This wasn't charity, this was dignity. As he stood up, the world around him seemed different. The bullies had left, the cafe crowd was murmuring, and Tommy sat frozen, staring at the money in his hand like it was something more than paper. Keanu knew this wasn't enough. A few $100s wouldn't fix Tommy's life. But a moment of kindness, that could plant a seed. He finished his espresso, adjusted his jacket, and walked away. Not looking for praise, not expecting gratitude. But as he left, he felt something change. A ripple. And ripples had a way of turning into waves. Tommy sat on the sidewalk long after Keanu left, his fingers still clutching the stack of bills like it might disappear if he blinked too long. He wasn't used to kindness. At least not like that. People had given him money before. A few dollars here, some loose change there. But this wasn't just cash, it was respect. And the way Keanu had done it, sitting beside him, treating him like an equal, felt even more surreal. Across the street, people whispered. The barista inside the cafe had seen everything. A couple of customers had filmed it. And Ryan, the youngest of the bullies, stood by a lamppost, staring at the scene with guilt shadowing his face. Tommy exhaled, trying to steady himself. He thought about getting up, but where would he go? A few $100 wouldn't change the fact that he had no home, no job, no way out of this cycle. Then a voice broke through his thoughts. "You really just sat down next to him?" Tommy turned his head. Ryan had walked over, his hands shoved in his hoodie pockets. His cocky demeanor from earlier was gone. Tommy shrugged. "Yeah." Ryan hesitated before crouching down. "Why?" Tommy studied him. The kid looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he wanted an answer or just wanted to make himself feel better. "Because I've been where you are," Tommy said finally. Ryan frowned. "No way! You don't know me!" Tommy let out a tired chuckle. "Sure I do. You think I was always like this? Sleeping on sidewalks?" Ryan didn't respond, so Tommy continued. "I had a job, a wife, a home," he exhaled. "Then she got sick. Cancer. Bills piled up. I lost the house. Lost everything. And people like you, they don't look at guys like me and think, that could be me one day." Ryan shifted, visibly uncomfortable. "I wasn't trying to—" "I know," Tommy interrupted, "but that doesn't change what happened." Ryan swallowed hard. His gaze flicked to the money still in Tommy's hand, then back up. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked quietly. Tommy studied him for a long moment. He could tell the kid wanted to do something, anything to erase the guilt. I don't know, Tommy admitted, but I know today was different. Ryan nodded slowly, then to Tommy's surprise reached into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled $50 bill and held it out. For what it's worth, Ryan muttered, I'm sorry. Tommy stared at the money, not because he needed it, but because of what it meant. This wasn't just about Keanu anymore. Kindness was spreading, and that was worth something. The cafe had settled back into its usual rhythm. Coffee orders, casual conversations, people moving on with their day. But for Tommy, nothing felt the same. Ryan's $50 bill sat in his lap, untouched. He wasn't sure why he hadn't pocketed it yet. Maybe because, for the first time in a long time, it wasn't just about the money. It was about what had changed. Ryan, now standing awkwardly beside him, shoved his hands deeper into his hoodie. So, what are you going to do? Tommy exhaled. That's the question, isn't it? He could stretch this money for a few weeks, cheap motels, dollar menu meals. But then what? He'd be back on the street, right where he started. Then a car pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped Keanu Reeves. Tommy's eyes widened. Ryan's jaw dropped. Keanu walked over casually, like showing up twice in one day was completely normal. He crouched down beside Tommy again, giving him the same calm look as before. Still here, huh? Keanu said. Tommy let out a small, incredulous laugh. Didn't expect to see you again. Keanu smirked. Yeah, well, I've been thinking. He glanced at Ryan, then back at Tommy. You ever work in a garage? Tommy blinked. A long time ago. Used to be a mechanic. Keanu nodded like that was exactly what he wanted to hear. Good, because I've got a friend. Owns a shop a few miles from here. Could use another set of hands. Tommy's breath caught. You're serious? Keanu shrugged. Figured you might want something more than just money. For a moment, Tommy didn't know what to say. No one had ever offered him a way out before. Ryan spoke up, still looking shocked. Wait, you're giving him a job? Keanu looked at him. Why not? Ryan had no answer. Tommy stared at the pavement, overwhelmed. He thought about the nights he had spent wishing for something, anything to change. And now change was standing right in front of him. Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card. He placed it in Tommy's hand. Be there tomorrow at noon. Tommy swallowed hard. His fingers tightened around the card. I don't know how to thank you. Keanu smiled. You don't have to. Then, as if it was just another regular day, Keanu patted Tommy's shoulder, gave Ryan a knowing nod, and walked back to his car. Ryan turned to Tommy. Dude, what just happened? Tommy let out a breathless laugh. I think my life just changed. The next morning, Tommy stood outside Briggs Auto Repair, staring at the sign like it might disappear if he blinked. He had barely slept. The weight of what had happened, Keanu, Ryan, the job offer, felt surreal. He half expected it to be some kind of dream, but the business card in his pocket said otherwise. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The place smelled of oil and metal, a scent he hadn't been around in years. Behind the counter stood a burly man in a grease-stained jumpsuit. He looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. You Tommy? Tommy nodded hesitantly. Yeah, Keanu sent me. The man studied him for a second, then grinned. Figures, that guy's got a weird way of helping people. He wiped his hands on a rag and extended one. I'm Joe Briggs. Welcome to your second chance. Tommy shook his hand, still unsure if this was really happening. You sure you want to take a chance on me? Joe chuckled. Keanu wouldn't vouch for just anybody. You know your way around an engine? Tommy straightened. Yeah, used to work in a shop years ago. Good. Joe tossed him a set of coveralls. Then let's get to work. 2 weeks later, Tommy wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on a Chevy truck. His hands, once idle and trembling in the cold, now had purpose again. He had a job. He had a small apartment above the garage. He had a chance. And it all started with a simple act of kindness. That night, after locking up the shop, Tommy pulled out a scrap of paper and started writing. Dear Keanu, I don't know if you expected to hear from me, but I had to say this. You didn't just give me money. You gave me dignity, a future. I wake up every day now with a reason to keep going, and I owe that to you. I hope one day I can pass that kindness forward. Thank you. Truly. Tommy. He folded the note carefully and placed it in an envelope. The next day, he left it with Joe, who simply smiled and said, I'll make sure he gets it. Somewhere in Los Angeles. Keanu Reeves sat at a quiet cafe, reading the letter with a small, satisfied smile. He folded it neatly, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and went back to his coffee. Just another ripple, just another life changed, and that was enough.